this video, I want to explore hurt and also the subcategory of hurt, which is hostility, hurt that wants to hurt others. And we may get into the kind of geopolitical engineering of violence. What's the function, evolutionarily and otherwise, in violence? And hurt is definitely an emotional experience. It's the combination of grief, pain, loneliness, sadness, tenderness, extreme vulnerability, and a sense of loss, a sense of something really precious and beautiful that's been lost. When this is coupled with the thought, with the perceptions that we have been betrayed, that we have been abandoned, that we are alone in our caring, that we are betrayed into a lonely source of pain, then it's very difficult to get out of hurt, particularly when the hurt has a couple of waves, or when the betrayal has a couple of waves. So, one aspect of hurt is an investment of ourselves, an investment of a part of us into creating, sharing, becoming one with an idea or with another person. And when I say becoming one, what I mean is that our identity is a mixture of what we do, what we say, what we think, and what we feel. And the more we I found this myself as a self-employed contractor, that for a number of, for at least a decade, I never took a vacation. And as a result, my whole identity was as a contractor. And that's what I did, that's what I thought about, that's what I felt about, that's what I talked about. And whether it was teaching classes, doing designs, installing work, that was the whole identity. And then there was also the preparations. A lot of the goals, a lot of the significant goals were in the business domain. And I remember when I took my first 30-day vacation, it was very tenuous, because I would want to keep doing the things that told me who I was. And when I said, no, just hold your horses and push through this, stop being this role, there was a little bit of dissociation, there was a little bit of grief, there was definite anxiety. And this was in the process of a self-chosen 30-day vacation. Not only that, but I noticed that it took 30 days before I pushed through the anxiety. That basically, for the first 30 days, I was largely in role as if I was a contractor, feeling the uncomfortable feelings of not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But then at the 30-day point, there was this shift into I'm not a contractor. I am a whimsical artist. I am a writer. I am a this. I'm a that. I'm a cook. I'm a person who takes walks and actually engages with the neighbors. I'm this and I'm that and I'm this. And sometimes I do contracting. Now this is a very big shift, and considering our basic fear of the unknown, which directly ties into our basic instincts around survival, it's a pretty big deal to shift one's identity. It's one of the biggest aspects, for example, of losing weight permanently. It's not hard for many people to lose the weight, but it's very challenging and very vulnerable to create a new identity from, for example, an unattractive person. And I'm not saying that you or I would find such a person unattractive. The key is their own identity. If they see themselves as unattractive and correlate that to weight, and then a few months later they see themselves or start to see themselves as attractive, that may be a very traumatic experience, particularly if the weight management is part of a larger strategy of managing the traumas associated with attractiveness. And this is a very vulnerable arena, this identity adjustment. Now, the most vulnerable areas of identity adjustment are in the arenas of love and giving of ourself, our sense of worth, our sense of value, our sense of contribution, our sense of love. And when we choose to fall in love and to stand in love and to commit to being in love, when we receive the love of another person, it's an alchemical process of transforming the identity from I'm a single guy, I do whatever I want when I want because I want to. That could be the identity. Or I work hard and my work is the most important thing. That might be the identity. It's saying I am a partner. I am part of something bigger. And I reference that part. I reference what's good for my community. I reference what's good for my partner. I reference what's good for my country. And I partner. I am a partner in that process. This is a very vulnerable terrain, because when we choose to reference something other than our limited ego self, there is a loyalty, there is a trust, there's a loyalty to this third entity, and there's a statement that that third entity is more important than me. It's when two parents create a child and start referencing that child and saying what is good for this child is more important than just what is good for me. When that happens, it creates the possibility of betrayal, of loneliness. And betrayal and loneliness are the experience that, for example, you just paid $30,000 for this child to be safer. You just bought this security alarm, you did this, you got an extra thing. But then your partner is getting drunk, carrying a loaded firearm, threatening the child because of their, agendas, addictions, issues, etc. And you cannot fully protect that child alone. You are in partnership. You've trusted this partner to co-create this third energy. And then you're building your identity. You're working more so that you can provide for this third identity. You're building the company in partnership. You're doing this, you're doing that. And when you are undermined in a marriage, like you're busily doing this, and this to give the marriage a chance, and then you realize you're alone in that while you were driving a different street to avoid, whether it's prostitutes or gambling or various things that provide a short-term pleasure for you, so that you can invest those resources in the relationship. Your partner is not doing those things. They are busy with their addiction of one form or another. And there's a hurt, there's a loneliness. The loneliness being alone in the partnership. You're partnering to create this greater whole. They're ignoring the partnership. They're focusing on themselves. And the second level of loneliness, that they don't care enough about you to tell you that they cannot be a partner. Because, for example, in a contracting relationship where a contractor signs a contract and says, I will have your house done in 8 months from now. And then their wife has an illness. And then their son gets a sprained ankle. And then another client has trouble with work done a few years ago and demands some repairs. And then the strain of these things starts kicking up fibromyalgia, because trying to manage all of these things, which are simultaneously cutting into one's income while demanding more expenses, provides a strain in the absence of savings and reserves. And as a result, you are not going to be able to finish that house in 8 months. The contractor is not. It's going to take more like 12 or 15 months. And the client chose that contractor from among many possible contractors. And at that point, they had all the leverage. But it was the sincerity that they trusted, the real interest in helping. But the contractor is so self-absorbed in all that process that they do not inform their partner, I'm really sorry. This is happening, and this is happening. And I'm not sure if I can do what is needed for you. Now, this is a tricky dance, because in this partnership, it's like, how deep is the partnership? You know, what if for the contractor this is the only job and they do need the money? It's just going to take twice as slow, but the client wouldn't have hired them if they knew all these things were happening. What if the contractor communicates this as soon as an inkling starts to come up, as soon as his wife, has the first issue and says, I've just had a 10% strain added to my life. I'm working to keep up with it. Now I've just had a 20% strain added to my life with the son's ankle, and I'm working to keep up with it. And I'll keep you in dialogue, but I'm being pressured in unexpected ways that will certainly affect how much I am able to show up for you, the client. But I'm not sure how much yet. And then fibromyalgia is kicking up. I've now got a 40% additional strain. So I'm not watching TV. I'm not going out. I'm just laying in bed on the weekends and working for you during the week. Will a client also honor that partnership of this journey they've begun together? Or say, yeah, I'm not interested. I want to be in my house in 6 months, and you go solve your problems somewhere else. And this is also, of course, part of the dance. This is because with clients that care about the emotions and state of the contractor, it creates more safety, of course, for a more natural loop for the contractor to put the client's needs first, as opposed to playing a manipulative game in which the client can't really switch to another contractor halfway through the building process, and so is stuck working with that contractor, but might have been able to do that if the contractor had alerted them every step of the way, and maybe even at the first juncture of anything going wrong. So this is an area of betrayal and pain and anger and hurt. And usually the hurt comes from the sense that I'm giving my all, and I'm making this sacred with a sacrifice, sacred. I'm choosing to delay. I'm choosing to delay or bypass my short-term pleasure for the relationship, for your feelings, and you are not choosing to do the same for me. You are not making this sacred. What I am making sacred with this sacrifice, you are using for your own personal gratification. And so there's a betrayal in that. First in the doing it, and then secondly in the lack of honesty around it. Because if you care about someone, like if you see that your partner is, going the extra mile 150% to save the relationship, and you neither want the relationship, are willing to do a goddamn thing, and are not going to balance that out. You're just going to use and take as much as you can before the relationship falls apart. That's a betrayal in two forms. First, the lack of sacrifice, the lack of balance. And secondly, the lack of consideration and care enough to tell the other person the truth about what's going on. And when someone has put goodness and beauty into that sacrifice, that betrayal is a very deep one. Goodness and beauty into that sacrifice. That betrayal is a deep one. So it's important to understand where the hurt comes from, because when one gives oneself to something more, such as the Vietnam veterans in the United States, they were lied to, they were betrayed in so many ways, from being told that they were serving their country, that they were serving American interests by napalming these women and children in a faraway country, as if a truly unsustainable construct such as communism wouldn't collapse on its own. Why not leave the Vietnamese to decide for themselves what they wanted and learn through trial and error, and just provide refugees status for anyone that didn't want to be a prisoner in that forced communism, etc. Is it really what we want as a people, to in any way support the burning women and children, and the death of our own young men, and the destruction of families and the creation of PTSD, but then in the return from that service, having PTSD denied for many years as an issue at all, etc., etc. So hurt is difficult. It's very difficult because there's pain, there's loneliness, there's disappointment, there's a rupture in the sense of one's emotions and one's sense of identity simultaneously. Because when your respect or when your honor, when you've chosen to give yourself to a partnership, for example, and your partner, the thing that in this partnership that you have sacrificed yourself for, attacks, denigrates, criticizes, etc., and hurts you, it's a double whammy, because first you're giving up the most self-centered way of feeding yourself, whether it's giving up sex whenever it comes available to protect the sexual monogamy of the relationship, or whether it's giving up eating out, at gourmet restaurants, etc., so that you can provide more mundane food for a whole family, or giving up on gambling and thrill pleasures so that you can tend to the house for the partner or the family. Whatever there is of a transcendent sacrifice, a making sacred this thing that is bigger than self, family, partnership. That when you, to a certain extent, feed on yourself, weaken yourself to feed and nourish this third energy, when something around that third energy then attacks you rather than nourishes you, now you're weakening something to feed something that is attacking you, and it is very, very painful. Judgments, criticisms, betrayals, lies, hostility, violence, all of this is an attack, and it's weakening you still further. This is a very vulnerable and difficult situation, because you are now in a weakened state in the co-creation of something that is now weakening you still further. And if that cannot change, if the status quo is that you are sacrificing yourself to feed something that is in turn attacking you, not leading to some ideal or something bigger or something that nourishes both of you more than what you were doing alone, then it needs to end, which is of course very difficult if a child is involved. But it's not sustainable to give of yourself to create something that feeds and further attacks yourself. You have to give of yourself to something beautiful, something truer, something more good that evokes the best, that supports you in becoming more nourished, more of who you truly are, a better you. That's the ultimate kind of journey in this co-creation. So hurt is hurt is this sense of giving of ourselves into something that is not acknowledged, not reciprocated, not honored, not met, not appreciated. And that is instead betrayed, used, lied to. And when that is done consciously with someone in a sociopathic state, that you were alone in the falling in love, you were alone in believing in the ideal, in the lifting out of the sociopathic and self-centered brain, in through the human brain of trust and up into the ideal brain of the pineal gland. When you've made that journey alone and you realize that one or more of the other people involved have not done that at all. It's more been a game for them, a manipulative edge, that they are simply exploiting the vulnerability of trust and of generosity for their own sociopathic agendas, to get more for less, with no regard for your feelings and risk. Then the hurt comes in combination with humiliation, with a deeper pain and loneliness. And when that is not understood and respected or cared about, but is further betrayed, hurt often becomes something more. It becomes rage, helplessness, a deep wound, a sense of betrayal, and perhaps hate, but definitely moving towards hostility, which is hurt that wants to hurt. I'm hurt by you. You don't care. You are sociopathically doing whatever is necessary to further exploit and benefit from the situation. I'm hurt again and again and again. Now, one of the things that makes hostility more probable is this investment in identity. So let's say you're a woman and you've dreamed of having this family, because it's very difficult. Let's face it, it is very difficult for us in this, quote, free age, where we are free to make and spend money however we decide to make and spend money, is what this boils down to decide our identity. It's very difficult. It's no longer given to us as an identity. It's a very arduous and complicated process of first figuring out what is acceptable and stuff to others, and then who we want to be, and often they're not in sync. Often whether it's the client or the partner or the family or the neighbors or the country as a whole want you to be so and so, but you'd like to be so and so. but they don't want you to be so and so. And so there's these big tensions between the ideal selves and lives that we would like to be living and the lives that we're actually living. And so let's say that a woman finds a certain amount of compromised peace in this idea that, of being a mother with a family. And it's very difficult to find someone that she's attracted to and wants as a partner in that project and has trust in, and who can be around some of her tender wounds and this and that and the other. It's very difficult. And it's very difficult for her to hold on to a sense of identity without being able to play that role of doing, thinking, feeling, and saying. In other words, when we look for something for too long, rather than living and being that thing because there's no role, then we are no longer an actor in these type of movie. We are a looker for the script. But let's say we don't want to be someone looking. We want to be someone acting, someone playing the role that we want to play. And yet the role isn't there. And so in that situation, there is a desperation. There's a pulling away. The gap between reality and the dream. Is that gap getting so big or lasting so long that it's too painful to hold on to? Do you let go of the dream? And there's a profound vulnerability in wanting to be someone, wanting to play a certain role, and not finding and being able to co-create the script, not finding the people that want to play the various roles that would allow you to play your role. So when you find someone finally, and you're giving it some of your last shot, let's say you're 37, 38 years old, you figure you've got until 42 to have this child and have this identity. And a man who is attractive, who has many of the qualities, and who you gloss over the qualities that he doesn't have in order to keep the dream alive. And in the throes of early passion and sex, he's willing to talk about marriage later because it feels so good now, and he enjoys that role of being the pleasure provider, the source of fulfilling the dream, which provides, it's kind of a debt into the future. It's like I get to feel like a hero now without actually marrying and having kids, just by talking about it, which of course, just a few words, doesn't take any work. But then as the reality settles in, as he takes her off of her pedestal that he put her on, as he looks at the realities of his body, his capacity to function in the world, his reserves, his money, his income, his own goals, his own various things, and he decides he's not going to get married and have children. But he doesn't tell her. He starts evading. And then a year or so before, it's really past her window of that dream, he sits down and withdraws or runs away if he's not willing to take responsibility for his impact. And the grief of this, the hurt, the longing, because for those years, those 2 or 3 years together, she had the dream in her hands, and she sacrificed for that dream. She put him first. She worked on the relationship. She started saving money. She learned about parenting. She started reading books. She started growing into that role. And now she's alone. The odds of her finding that again are 10%. It's hard to say whether it's more painful to let go of the dream or go knowing there's only 10% odds of doing that, which many 40-year-old women understand the odds by that point. It's not all about magic when you have to sift through 200 Craigslist ads or 2,000 Match.com profiles, all saying essentially the same thing in a very difficult situation. So part of the way that hurt becomes hostility is when we cannot extricate ourselves gracefully and easily from this third identity. Because the joy that it's brought and the clarity that it's brought and the protection from depression and fear and stuff that it has brought, as it falls away, is too disorienting to have to deal with a broken identity and pain and hurt and uncertainty and fear of the unknown and fear of loneliness all at the same time. Plus dealing with the fear of betrayal that is bigger as a result of this happening. It's bigger now because she now knows that her dream man, the one that she picked above 200 others, the one that she relied on, is not above leaving her in the lurch, is not above a certain degree of manipulation of the truth, of his readiness and ability to commit in order to benefit him in his identity at her expense and her identity. That this is not, in other words, she realizes that she cannot trust as easily the next time around. So this is a dramatically difficult situation, and hating and wanting to hurt him is one direction that can go, because I can't create a new identity on my own. I don't know what that looks like. I can't find another man that I trust. I can trust even less than before because of you. In other words, you have done this to me. You have hurt me. You've taken this window of time. You've rejected me. You've lowered my sense of self-worth. And it's very vulnerable in this third sphere, because I am saying that us is more important than me. That's why I'm making us sacred by sacrificing. It's like every day that I receive interest from a woman sexually that would give me pleasure, and I think about the feelings of my partner, and I know exactly what that pleasure that I'm giving away is. It's a sacrifice. I would enjoy that pleasure. And I'm letting it go, because the third energy, the relationship energy, is more important to me. And because I believe that my partner would make and is making similar sacrifices, similar making sacred this third energy of an us that grows, that is more valuable than, a monotony of sexual thrills. That's more valuable. And in part because, and this gets back to hostility, a monotony of sexual thrills in succession always ends in pain, because the best sexuality is rich with emotion. And in most of the spinnings within, so it's either boring because there's no emotion, or it's rich with emotion, in which case there's constant spinning. There's usually one person more emotionally invested than another, and it's the one that's more invested that provides the juice for the sexual experience and is simultaneously betrayed for doing so, because I met a woman with one of the most beautiful bodies of my life, but she had this little ritual in which she turned off all emotion. We would be deep and rich in conversation and joy and connection, and and talking with her heart, just cuddling gently, or just talking with one another. Very rich. But as soon as we started pivoting toward something more sexual, dissociation of all emotion, which of course I wasn't at all interested in, because I'm not going to separate my emotion in order to have a sexual thrill. And yet, if she is not there emotionally, it's not fun. It's not, I'm alone in those feelings. She's got nothing on the table, nothing on the line. And of course, like so many things, you receive back the gifts you put in. But like so many things, the best form of partnership is an equal partnership. Someone with an equal investment and equal care and consideration of the issue. So there's this very important area of making sacred with sacrifice, and the rewards are very high when we do that and do that well. And the pain, the hurt, because back to that fragile thing, if I give up money, time, energy, pleasure, expediency in order to invest in a relationship, and then I discover my partner, one, is not doing that, and two, that they don't value me enough to care about my feelings, even enough to talk about their betrayal. Because it's very kind to say to someone early on, when you see them trying to build something together, it's very kind to say, this is not a good match for me, and here's why it's not a good match for me. Don't weaken yourself. Don't weaken yourself and give of yourself for something around me, because I don't have either the compatibility or the values to bless you, to appreciate who you are. So it's self-destructive. Because when you tell yourself through your sacrifice that this person, is more valuable than yourself, that the relationship with this person is more valuable than self. You give a gift, you give money, whatever. And thus the relationship doesn't value you. It's as if you have promoted a radio host that tells everyone what a shit you are. It's like saying, I think this radio host, has this great message for the public good. Here, let me give you $10,000. And then, having done that, instead of upgrading your car or putting on a new burglar alarm or investing in your retirement fund, having done that, you turn on the radio proud of your sacrifice, of what you have invested in for the community good or whatever, and you hear back, that guy, people who donate money are sleazeballs, I don't need this and that and the other, and some of the people around here have too much money or they wouldn't have been able to fund me, and you basically realize that this person has scorn and disgust for you, and you've created this very difficult message for yourself because you've cared so much about this third energy that you've invested in it, and thus have given yourself the message that this is more important than you, only to find that the message coming back from that more important thing that you've just given status to is criticizing you. And so you take a huge hit to your sense of self-worth and image and all that. And then it's disorienting to pivot, to disengage. It's like if you then say, I was a fool, you make it worse. Because you say, I was a fool for giving that person the money. So first of all, you've said, I'm not as important as this person, let me give them the money. Then they've said, you're not as important as me, that's why I'm going to use you and I don't care about you at all. And then you say, I'm a fool for giving them this money, and you've got 3 major whacks right on top of having less money. So you've got no emotional and mental reward, and you're physically more impoverished. Now this happens simultaneously when you go into relationship. I love you so much, I'm going to court you, I'm going to do this. Well, I'm going to use you. I don't love you that much, but I'll use you. And then I'll discard you. And then I will feel like I was the fool for doing that. So it's very important to love ourselves and to be kind enough to understand this political aspect of hurt and why it often turns to hostility, is that when you've sacrificed to be hurt and then you hurt yourself and you realize that it is the insensitivity, self-centeredness, cruelty, etc. of the other person, their inability to be kind, that led in part to this, and you feel like you've done your best, it can pivot. And if you see them soaring off on, without a backward glance for your condition at this very vulnerable time, it's very easy to feel hostile. It's very easy to feel hostile, to feel angry, to feel hurt. And so this is the real vulnerability. And there's often no human response. A really good friend is priceless. A really good friend is priceless in this terrain. Most friends don't want to feel that hurt, though, and that pain, and just be there with you. And so there's a lot of a sense of wanting to dissociate. A cheap friend will dissociate from your pain so as not to feel it. They'll say something like, well, if you weren't so stupid to care about that person, you wouldn't be feeling that hurt. Therefore, you shouldn't be feeling that hurt. Therefore, I'm not going to feel that hurt with you. I'm going to feel annoyed at your stupidity. Well, that's a betrayal right there, and that's hurt. And a friend that does that to you in that moment, you may feel hostile towards them. There may be a desire to hurt them for pretending to be a friend, when really they won't stand there in the trenches with you and stay open to the incredible agony that you're going through. So that's hurt and some thoughts about hurt for now.